"You're fired. Pack your things and leave immediately." Sarah's world crumbled as she stood in shock, hearing the hospital director's voice echo through the hall. Just hours ago, she had risked everything to save a dying veteran. Now she was unemployed, her entire career shattered. But as she sat at home in despair, 4 luxury cars pulled up outside. Who were they? And why were they looking for her? Would you risk your career to save a stranger? Watch till the end. The truth will leave you speechless. The fluorescent lights of Memorial Hospital buzzed overhead as Sarah Johnson finished her night shift. 15 years as a trauma nurse had taught her to move efficiently, checking each patient one final time before handover. At 38, her once perfect ponytail now showed streaks of premature gray, badges of honor from countless nights like this one. "Mrs. Rodriguez's fever finally broke," Sarah told the incoming nurse, handing over a meticulously organized clipboard. "And Mr. Dawson needs his pain meds at exactly 8 a.m., not 8:30 like the chart says. He doesn't complain, but I can see it in his eyes." That was Sarah's gift, seeing what others missed. Not just vital signs, but the subtle signals that often made the difference between life and death. The other nurses called it her sixth sense. Administration called it protocol deviation. As Sarah walked toward the staff room, she noticed Dr. Patel waving her over, his expression grim. Behind him stood Linda from HR and the new hospital administrator, Mr. Reynolds, a recent MBA graduate whose cost-cutting measures had already resulted in shorter patient stays and reduced medication options. "Sarah, please join us in conference room B," Linda said, her voice artificially pleasant. The conference room felt colder than usual. Sarah clutched her coffee mug, a chipped ceramic piece with "Nurses Save Lives" printed in fading letters, a gift from a grateful family 5 years ago. "Yesterday you administered Cardio-Zem to Mr. Hansen," Mr. Reynolds began without preamble. "That medication wasn't approved under our new formulary guidelines." Sarah sat up straighter. Mr. Hansen was showing early signs of cardiac distress. His history of arrhythmia? "The approved protocol was clear," Reynolds interrupted, sliding a paper across the table. "Monitor and report, then administer standard medication only after documented symptoms." "By then it could have been too late," Sarah countered. "He's 78 years old with a history of heart failure. I made a clinical judgment based on—" "Your job isn't to make those judgments anymore," Reynolds cut in. "We have standardized care pathways now." Dr. Patel looked down at his hands. The silence spoke volumes. "We're terminating your employment, effective immediately," Linda said softly, pushing a manila envelope forward. Sarah felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her. 15 years, thousands of patients, countless lives saved. "In my 15 years here," Sarah said, her voice barely steady, "I've never lost a patient on my watch when I could have prevented it, and I wasn't about to start yesterday." "Your dedication is admirable," Reynolds replied mechanically, "but our new protocols exist for a reason." 20 minutes later, Sarah stood in the parking lot, a small box containing her locker contents in her arms, a photo of her late parents, a spare set of scrubs, the thank you cards she'd saved over the years. Rain began to fall as she drove home, matching the tears on her cheeks. The apartment she could barely afford on a nurse's salary now seemed an impossible burden. Her dream of opening a community clinic for underserved neighborhoods, the reason she'd worked countless double shifts and holidays, felt like a cruel joke now. Her phone battery died just as she tried calling her aunt in Florida, her only family left. Alone with her thoughts, Sarah took a detour down Old Mill Road to avoid rush hour traffic, her windshield wipers barely keeping up with the downpour. That's when she saw it. A car pulled awkwardly to the side of the deserted road, hazard lights blinking weakly through the rain. Sarah's instincts kicked in before her mind could process what she was seeing. She pulled over, grabbing her dead phone out of habit before remembering it was useless. The rain pelted her scrubs as she approached the vehicle, an older model sedan with a faded "Support Our Troops" magnet on the bumper. Inside, an elderly man slumped over the steering wheel, not moving. Sir, can you hear me?" Sarah knocked on the window, then tried the door. Unlocked. The interior light revealed a man in his 70s, his complexion ashen, a Vietnam veteran cap fallen to the floorboard. His breathing was shallow, skin clammy. Classic signs of cardiac arrest beginning. Sarah had no stethoscope, no medication, no defibrillator, none of the tools that had been at her fingertips just hours ago. But her trained hands knew what to do. She shifted the man's weight, maneuvering him onto the passenger seat to create space. The gold wedding band on his finger caught the dim light as she carefully moved his arm. "I'm a nurse," she told him, though she wasn't sure if that was still true. "I'm going to help you." She began chest compressions, mentally counting the rhythm that had become second nature after years of emergency room work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The man's wallet fell from his jacket. A military ID card slipped out. Robert Miller, age 72. "Stay with me, Robert," Sarah urged, continuing compressions. "You're not going anywhere on my watch." 5 minutes passed, then 10. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. She was performing medicine without a license now. Technically a crime. The irony wasn't lost on her. Fired for breaking protocol to save a life. Now breaking the law to do the same. 15 minutes in, headlights appeared on the road. Sarah waved frantically with one hand while maintaining compressions with the other. A young couple pulled over, eyes widening at the scene. "Call 911, Sarah shouted. "Tell them we have a 70-something male in cardiac arrest." The young man dialed immediately, then delivered the crushing news. "The dispatcher says it's at least 30 minutes before an ambulance can get here. There's a pile-up on the highway." Sarah made a split-second decision. "We need to get him to Memorial Hospital ourselves. It's 15 minutes away if we hurry." Is he going to make it?" the young woman asked, helping Sarah move Robert to their back seat. "Not if we wait," Sarah replied grimly. The couple's sedan raced through the rain, the young man driving while his wife helped Sarah continue CPR in the cramped back seat. "My name's Sarah, by the way," she managed between compressions. "Jason and Emily," the young man replied, eyes fixed on the road. "Is there anything else we can do?" Sarah noticed a small pill container that had fallen from Robert's pocket. "He's diabetic," she said, recognizing the medication. Another complication. As they neared the hospital, Robert stopped breathing completely. Sarah tilted his head back, giving 2 rescue breaths before resuming compressions. Her arms felt like lead, her back screaming in protest, but she didn't stop. "Come on, Robert," she whispered. "I already lost my job today. I'm not losing you too." In Robert's wallet, a faded photograph showed 4 young men in military uniforms standing beside him, all with his same proud stance and determined eyes. His sons, perhaps. And a handwritten note yellowed with age. "Come home safe, my hero. Love, Mary." "Your family needs you, Robert," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "Mary needs you to fight." His eyelids fluttered briefly, a ghost of a response. The hospital emergency entrance loomed ahead, the same doors Sarah had exited in disgrace just hours before. Now she was returning, not as an employee, but as a desperate woman trying to save a stranger's life, breaking every rule in the process. What Sarah couldn't know was that Robert Miller wasn't just any veteran, and his sons weren't just any soldiers. The chain of events she had set in motion by stopping on that rainy road would soon come full circle in ways she couldn't imagine. But first, she had to get him through those doors alive. "I need a crash cart and a cardiac team now," shouted as Jason helped her wheel Robert through the emergency room doors. Her scrubs, still on from earlier, gave her an air of authority that didn't reflect her unemployed status. The weekend staff, unfamiliar faces, jumped to action before questions could be asked. A nurse reached for Robert's wrist to check his pulse, but Sarah didn't break her rhythm of compressions. Approximately 35 minutes in cardiac arrest, diabetes, history unknown. "No meds administered in field," she reported mechanically. "I've been maintaining CPR since finding him unresponsive in his vehicle." Dr. Winters, the weekend attending physician, appeared at her side. "We'll take it from here," he began, then recognized her. "Sarah? Weren't you just—" "Yes. Fired. Doesn't matter right now," she interrupted, still counting compressions in her head. "His name is Robert Miller, Vietnam vet, early 70s. The team transferred Robert to a trauma bay, smoothly taking over. Sarah stepped back, suddenly aware of her soaking wet scrubs, her trembling arms, the utter exhaustion washing over her. She'd been awake for nearly 24 hours straight. "Sarah Johnson?" A sharp voice cut through her haze. Mr. Reynolds stood at the nurse's station, his expression a mixture of shock and anger. You no longer work here. You cannot be performing medical procedures in this hospital. Emily, the young woman who had helped transport Robert, stepped forward. She saved that man's life. He'd be dead if she was practicing medicine without proper authorization. Reynolds countered coldly. I'm afraid I'll need to report this incident to the medical board. The unfairness of it all hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her legs nearly buckled as the adrenaline that had kept her going finally ebbed away. She'd lost her job, possibly her career, and now faced potential legal consequences, all for doing what she was trained to do: save lives. Jason put a steadying hand on her shoulder. We're witnesses, he said firmly. We saw everything. This woman is a hero. Dr. Winters emerged from the trauma bay, his face unreadable. Sarah, can I speak with you privately? Her heart sank. This was it. Robert hadn't made it, all for nothing. In a quiet consultation room, Dr. Winters sat across from Sarah. Robert suffered another cardiac event during initial treatment, he began, his voice grave. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting back tears. But we managed to stabilize him, he continued. It's still touch and go, but he's fighting. Relief flooded through her, so powerful she had to grip the chair to stay upright. Thank you, she whispered. No, Sarah, thank you. The paramedics couldn't have reached him in time. Your actions gave him a chance. Dr. Winters paused. But Reynolds is right about one thing. You're not staff anymore. I can't let you stay in the treatment areas. The victory felt hollow. Sarah nodded mutely and walked to the public waiting room, where Jason and Emily still waited. He's alive, she told them. For now. Emily hugged her impulsively. You were amazing back there. I was just doing my job, Sarah replied automatically, then corrected herself. My former job. The couple insisted on buying her coffee from the hospital cafeteria. As they talked, Sarah learned they were newlyweds, Emily a teacher, and Jason starting medical school in the fall. What you did today, Jason said earnestly, that's the kind of doctor I want to be. Someone who puts patients first no matter what. Sarah managed a tired smile. Just don't get fired for it. As evening turned to night, Emily and Jason reluctantly left, exchanging numbers with Sarah and extracting a promise to let them know how Robert fared. Alone in the waiting room, Sarah confronted the full weight of her situation. No job, no income, and potentially no career. At nearly midnight, a nurse Sarah knew, Diane from cardiology, spotted her in the waiting room and came over. Sarah? What are you still doing here, she asked, waiting to hear about a patient. Robert Miller? Diane's expression softened. The vet? He's in ICU, stabilized for now. She hesitated. He was conscious briefly, kept asking for the angel who helped him. Sarah's throat tightened. Just doing what anyone would do. Not anyone, Diane countered. Listen, I heard what happened with your job. It's not right. The staff is talking. Many of us are. A commotion at the entrance cut her off. 4 men in military-style clothing entered the waiting room. They're bearing unmistakably military despite their civilian clothes. They spoke briefly with the receptionist, who pointed directly at Sarah. As they approached, security also appeared at the opposite door, summoned by Reynolds, no doubt, to escort her from the premises. Are you Sarah Johnson? The oldest of the 4 men asked, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Yes, she answered, too exhausted for fear. The woman who was with Robert Miller tonight? Behind the men, the security guards were closing in. Sarah stood at the crossroads of consequences, unaware that the next few moments would change everything. Have you ever felt like your good deeds were being punished? Share your experience in the comments below. Ma'am, I'm Major James Miller, the man said, extending his hand. Robert Miller is our father. Sarah's confusion must have shown on her face. The security guards hovered uncertainly nearby. These are my brothers, the major continued, gesturing to the 3 men beside him. Michael, Stephen, and David. We flew in as soon as the hospital called us. The second tallest brother stepped forward. The doctors told us what you did, that without your intervention, our father wouldn't have made it to the hospital alive. The security supervisor cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, Mr. Reynolds has requested that you leave the premises immediately. Major Miller turned, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly. And you are? Hospital security, sir. This woman no longer works here and isn't authorized. This woman, Michael Miller interrupted, saved our father's life tonight. Perhaps you're unaware of who Robert Miller is? The security guards exchanged glances. Sir, we're just following protocol. Protocol, David Miller repeated, the word dripping with disdain. Would that be the same protocol that got Ms. Johnson fired for administering life-saving medication? Sarah stared at him. How did you know about that? We have friends on the hospital board, Stephen explained. Dad's foundation provides substantial funding to several hospitals in the region, including this one. The pieces suddenly clicked together in Sarah's exhausted mind. The Miller Veterans Healthcare Foundation? That Robert Miller? Major James nodded. Our father established it after returning from Vietnam. He's dedicated his life to ensuring veterans receive proper medical care. He turned back to the security guards. Perhaps you should inform Mr. Reynolds that the chairman of his largest donor organization is currently a patient here. Alive thanks only to Ms. Johnson. The guards retreated, suddenly eager to distance themselves from the situation. Sarah sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. The Miller Foundation was legendary in healthcare circles, a powerful organization that had revolutionized veteran care and provided millions in funding to hospitals nationwide. We'd like to speak with the hospital administrator, James continued, immediately. Within minutes, Reynolds appeared, his typical confidence replaced by a nervous smile when he spotted the Miller brothers. Gentlemen, I had no idea Mr. Miller was your father. Rest assured we're providing the absolute best care. Save it, Michael cut in. We're more interested in discussing why you fired the nurse who saved our father's life. Reynolds paled. There are protocols in place. Yes, protocols, Stephen interjected. Interesting that you mention those. Our foundation's grant to Memorial Hospital specifically included funding for the cardiosem that Sarah administered to her patient yesterday. The action you fired her for. I wasn't aware. Clearly, James said coldly. We've also learned that the cost-cutting measures implemented under your administration have resulted in precisely the kind of restricted medication access our grants were designed to prevent. David, the youngest brother, who had been quietly observing, finally spoke. Our father built this foundation on a simple principle. Medical decisions should be made by medical professionals, not administrators with spreadsheets. Reynolds visibly swallowed. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, James replied. We'll be speaking with the hospital board tomorrow. For now, we'd like some time with Ms. Johnson, if she's willing. All eyes turned to Sarah, who felt like she was watching a surreal play unfold before her. Of course, she managed. In a private consultation room, away from Reynolds' nervous hovering, the brothers explained more fully. Their father had been instrumental in establishing medical protocols that were now standard in veteran care facilities nationwide. His foundation had funded research, education, and direct care initiatives. When he regained consciousness briefly, James explained, he told the nurses about an angel who kept him fighting on that dark road. He said she reminded him of what healthcare should be. Sarah brushed away unexpected tears. I was just doing what needed to be done. That's precisely the point, Michael said. In a system increasingly dominated by protocols and profit margins, you chose the patient, just like our father has always advocated. Stephen leaned forward. Sarah, our foundation needs someone like you. We've been searching for a director of nursing standards, someone to oversee care protocols in our partner facilities, to ensure they maintain the human element alongside the necessary standardization. Sarah stared at them in disbelief. You're offering me a job. You don't even know me. We know what matters, David replied simply. Dad's a pretty good judge of character. Always has been. Think about it, James added. The position comes with the resources to actually change things, not just complain about them. As the conversation continued, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected to feel again so soon. Hope. Not just for herself, but for everything she'd believed in throughout her career. That healthcare should be about people first, system second. What had begun as the worst day of her professional life was transforming into something entirely different. Something with possibilities she couldn't yet fully grasp. And Robert Miller, the stranger whose life she'd saved, might just end up saving hers in return. 24 hours later, Sarah stood at her apartment window, watching in disbelief as 4 luxury cars pulled up outside her modest building. Neighbors peeked through curtains as the Miller brothers emerged, each carrying files and gift bags. "Have you decided?" James asked once they were seated in her small living room. The contrast between their tailored appearance and her humble furnishings might have been awkward, but their easy manner put her at ease. "I have some conditions," Sarah replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Michael raised an eyebrow. "We're listening." The Foundation's nursing protocols need to balance standardization with clinical judgment. Every patient is different. I want to develop guidelines that acknowledge that reality. Stephen nodded approvingly. "Dad will like that." "And I want to establish a scholarship program," Sarah continued, "for nurses who demonstrate exceptional patient care, especially those willing to stand up for their patients even when it's difficult." "Done," James said without hesitation. "Anything else?" Sarah took a deep breath. "The first community clinic project should be here in this neighborhood. There are many underserved families who delay care because they can't afford it or can't navigate the system." David smiled. "You've given this some thought." "I've had this dream for years," Sarah admitted. "I just never had the resources to make it happen." "Now you do," James said simply, extending his hand. "Welcome to the Miller Foundation, Sarah." As they shook hands, Michael handed her an envelope. "This is from Dad. He insisted we deliver it personally." Inside was a handwritten note on hospital stationery. "Some angels don't wear wings. They wear scrubs. Thank you for reminding me why I started this fight all those years ago. There's always a place for healers who put people first. Robert Miller." Beneath the note was a check with her name on it, a signing bonus that would cover her rent for a year. "He's recovering well," Stephen assured her, seeing her emotional reaction, already giving the nurses a hard time about his diet. "We'd like you to meet with him properly once he's discharged," James added. "He's quite eager to thank his angel in person." As they discussed details of her new role, Sarah couldn't help reflecting on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. Just 48 hours ago, she'd been devastated, her career seemingly over for doing what she believed was right. Now she was being handed the opportunity to shape nursing care on a much larger scale than she'd ever imagined possible. 3 months later, Sarah stood beside Robert Miller at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new community clinic. Now fully recovered, he beamed with pride as she addressed the gathered crowd, which included Jason and Emily, now recipients of the first Miller Foundation Medical Education Scholarship. "Healthcare isn't just about protocols and procedures," Sarah told the audience. "It's about seeing people at their most vulnerable and standing with them. Sometimes that means taking risks, breaking rules, following your instincts." Robert nodded in agreement, his hand resting on a cane adorned with his military insignia. "This clinic represents a new approach," she continued, "one that balances the best of modern medicine with the timeless value of human connection." She glanced at the Miller brothers standing in the front row. "And it proves that sometimes, when one door closes, an entire building of opportunity is waiting for you." The crowd applauded as Robert stepped forward to cut the ribbon, officially opening the first of what would become a nationwide network of community clinics under Sarah's guidance. Later, as the celebration continued, Sarah received a text from Diane, her former colleague. "Reynolds resigned today. New administration already revisiting those protocols you fought against. You started something bigger than you know." Sarah smiled, watching Robert surrounded by his sons, sharing stories with the first class of nursing scholarship recipients. From the darkest day of her career had come her greatest opportunity to create change. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything, and sometimes it gives back more than you ever dreamed possible. Have you ever experienced a moment where what seemed like your worst day turned into an unexpected blessing? Share your story in the comments. I'll read all comments and respond to the most touching ones. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.
I hope you enjoyed this thrilling journey. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this story? Let me know in the comments below. Your feedback inspires more epic tales.